All right. The next item on our agenda tonight is superintendent's reports and recommendations, and I think Dr. Anderson has an update on enrollment growth, so I will turn it over to him.
This is normally when I give the cue to indicate that if you were here for the recognition of the school program, you're free to go, but it looks like everyone's preempted my cue on that. But have a great evening, and thanks so much for being here tonight. Mr. Chair and members of the board, the reason that I'm here tonight with this presentation is to provide an overview and an update of some recent work that we've all been engaged in, but to specifically highlight some work that has been done by a committee and some preliminary thoughts and preliminary recommendations or ideas that have come forward regarding the management of our growth and also considering some critical funding considerations for the future. So I have a number of PowerPoint slides here that I'm going to share with you, and we'll provide an opportunity here after I've gone through these slides for you to ask any questions that you might have. So just to start off with a few thoughts, first of all, the goals of this particular presentation are to review a bit of our enrollment context, to outline some facilities needs, to share some additional budget issues, and to provide a proposed decision timeline for your consideration. I say that in knowing that a lot of discussion and conversations need to happen in terms of timelines and your eventual decision on how to guide the administration to move forward. But I'm hoping that this presentation will give you a good background in regard to some of the work that's been done. I'll also indicate and acknowledge that many of you have been very involved in committees where different parts of this have been discussed, and you've been involved in feedback and engagement along the way. So just a couple of recent responses to some survey questions and just some general observations and things that we've been noting over the last several years. It's really no surprise to any of you as board members that we're experiencing incredible growth within the school district, particularly for the current time up in the northern sections of the school district. And one thing that we do to get feedback from our community is to do periodic surveys where we inquire about how we're doing and things that we can focus on. And it's pleasing for us to get the feedback from our parents, those who have responded, that 94% of those rate the quality of our school district as excellent or good, which is a very high rating. And 90% of our residents feel that they get a great value or a good value for the investment in their schools and are very supportive of our work. Our demand continues to be very high. When we speak to builders and our city managers and the city council members of the entities within our the footprint of our school district, they regularly cite the school district, as do realtors and the home builders, as being one of the primary reasons that people are relocating to the footprint of the Wayzata School District. So that, along with wonderful communities to live in and great family amenities within our communities, are all reasons why we continue to see increased growth. I think word of mouth is also very strong from those who may have recently moved in or who have lived here for quite some time. Certainly speak highly of our communities and of our school district as well. So our growth continues. I know that's not a surprise to any of you. We recently had a demographer take a look at our enrollment projections, and we also completed a housing study recently with a consultant who specializes in that line of work. And within the next 3 years or so, we would anticipate that our school district could grow by as much as 1,000 students in grades K through 12. This year, for the first time ever, we surpassed the 11,000 student mark. I think we're right around 11,200 students currently. And we would anticipate that each of the next 3 to 4 years, we could have another 300 to 400 students that will be coming into the school district. I think this year we were up over 400 students from last year's enrollment, and that was a little bit of an accelerated growth rate than what we had anticipated. So the new housing developments, as I'd indicated before, in the northern part of the school district continue. The rate of the building of those new homes has accelerated, maybe twofold or threefold over some of our earlier projections, and we would anticipate that that's going to continue for a few years forward. A couple of ways to look at that. The homes and the families and the school-age children are going to come more rapidly, but the available areas within the school district to build will become less plentiful more quickly as well. So I would anticipate some type of a cap out into our future somewhere where will be built out. There's also some early indicators that there will be stable growth in the southern part of the district as some of our empty nesters consider downsizing or relocating, opening up their homes to young families with school-age children. We're finding that oftentimes the families that move in have early education children and or elementary children, so we're experiencing a pretty significant growth of relatively young families. As you're aware, we've recently added some additional classroom space at our high school. We relocated our Family Learning Center over to the new Early Learning School to create space at our high school and at Central Middle School. So those moves have positioned us pretty well, we believe, for accommodating the enrollment growth for middle school and high school age students. The challenge that we're experiencing is with our elementary age students. As you're aware, we opened Meadow Ridge Elementary School this year, and we exceeded the preliminary enrollment projections, I think, by about 100 students. And we still register and enroll new students into that building on a regular basis, and it continues to grow. And again, I don't think that will come to you as news, but certainly we continue to see this high level of growth into the district. But again, the capacity issues are primarily at our elementary. We think for a number of years into the future, our high school and middle school capabilities are going to accommodate growth for many years into the future. We recently convened a growth task force. They met between during January and February of 2017. During their meetings, they studied data, the enrollment trends and demographic trends within the community, and reviewed projections of enrollment growth. And they developed a recommendation for the school board on how to best manage our growth to meet students' needs. As you'll likely recall, they gave a brief overview in a recent presentation at a school board work session. And again, those preliminary findings and preliminary thoughts and recommendations came forward from these 25 members who were parents and community members who again worked in cooperation with our own staff and who had provided them with a good deal of information for them to ponder and consider and try to come up with some ideas for how to best move forward to accommodate our anticipated growth. The recommendation that they came forward with, and I'll just read it as quoted, due to our continued robust growth, the members of the Community Growth Task Force believe that a new elementary school needs to be available as soon as possible. And that was the recommendation that came forward to us. That recommendation would seem to be in alignment with the numbers and the housing studies that we've done and the anticipated growth of elementary age students and early education or preschool age, pre-K age students that will continue to be moving into the district or who are already here. Some of the other facility needs that came up, again, they looked at more than just enrollment, but they looked at facility adequacy. I think I can safely say that our facilities today have not been in better shape for many years. We've done a lot of upgrades and improvements, such as infrastructure improvements, HVAC or heating and ventilation, cooling systems within our schools, new roofs and sidewalks. You've been following that closely and working with us. So we've really done a lot of general upgrades and improvements. We've had a number of our schools that have had classrooms added on. As I'd indicated before, we built a new elementary school, we expanded our high school, and made some nice improvements at our middle school as well. Along with all of that, and with the committee having gained a good understanding about where we've been and where we currently are, and ideally where we may need to head in the future, they came up with some other ideas that the board should consider, and I think you've been involved in some preliminary overviews of that, but generally some additional focus brought to safety, where we would improve traffic flow and pedestrian safety at our elementary schools and also at Central Middle School. Central Middle School stands out a little bit because of its current and projected size. It's our largest middle school, and it's the area where most of the students who will be either residing in the northern areas of the district where a lot of our construction is. It has a very large attendance area, including those areas that we anticipate new homes will be built on. So we need to take a look at traffic flow and gain a better understanding of how we can improve that and be ready to accommodate heavier traffic before and after school. Capacity, particularly at Central Middle School, the cafeteria is really becoming challenged. We think we perhaps have found a short-term solution until we can perhaps expand to accommodate some of the growth. But that would be something else that would be really important, is to focus on that infrastructure at Central Middle School, because it's been a long time since that number of students that we're anticipating have actually been housed at Central Middle School. And as most of you I think would recall and know, Central used to be our high school. So at the time when the new high school was built, it was at or beyond its capacity as a high school, thus the new building. And then finally, for the academic area, so there's really three key areas: safety, capacity, and academics. Renovating the elementary and middle school media centers came forward as a recommendation to create additional flexible learning spaces to accommodate new technology systems and new methods of teachers instructing their students, and also looking at the performing arts spaces at East and West Middle School. As you're aware, Central Middle School has a relatively large auditorium. In fact, I think it's the largest one in the district. Again, that's not uncommon for former high schools to have some features that eventually become middle schools, and it might be differentiated a little bit compared to some of the other middle schools in a school district. But we'd like to take a look at East and West Middle Schools performing arts spaces and see if there are some possible renovations or considerations that could be given to those facilities. Some additional budget context. As you're aware, school districts rely primarily on state funding for the majority of their operating funds, and I know you're very closely involved in either through committee work or updates at work sessions and school board meetings about the current status of the finances for our school district. We're in good standing, but it's been challenging over the last several years because the state education funding formulas have not kept pace with the rate of inflation that we've experienced. And as a result of that, it's increasingly challenging us to find ways to present you with a balanced budget, which, as you know, by statute we need to do by the end of June. And Jim Westrom, our finance director, and his team have been working on preparing for the upcoming budget. It's a little bit challenging in a funding year when the legislature's in the process of determining what the funding levels will be for the next 2 years. In the first year, currently we have no idea really what that end result will be. In year 2 of the biennium, we will have knowledge about what formula increases are being brought forth, and we'll have a better feel for that. So literally, we're in a position now to plan our expenditures and do our staffing before we have a real clear picture. Although we have some ideas and we hear a lot of different inputs and thoughts, it's a little bit uncertain about what our funding will be for the coming year. So we're tracking that closely. And we, as is the case for most school districts or many school districts in the state, they supplement state funding with referendum dollars and have an operating levy to supplement the state education funding that's received. And as you're aware, we do have a levy that's currently in place. I'm not sure if, I think it has maybe 2 years of authority left on the existing levy. And the time is right for us to be taking a close look at that and trying to determine what our next steps should be to ensure that that stream of funding, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20% of our total operating budget, and how we want to manage that moving forward. So those are conversations that we'll be having in upcoming board work sessions and in our finance committee meetings, and again, working toward a recommendation to the board and an eventual possible vote on moving forward with some funding. This graphic demonstrates the budget cut history over the last, I don't know, 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years. And essentially, the top line would indicate no impact to the budget. The red downward bars, oriented bars that are on the bar graph indicate the amounts that we've reduced from our budgets over the last several years. So you can see each of those years shown there, those 8 fiscal years, we've actually reduced our budgets by the amounts indicated. So if you add those up, it's a cumulative total of over $16 million that we've found ways to reduce. We've done our best to try to minimize the direct impact on classrooms, but there has certainly been indirect impact in regard to the levels of support and programming that we're able to move forward. So I share that as a point of context and a review of where we've been with our finances over the last 8 years. This graphic shows where we're at in comparison currently for operating levy. The blue bar demonstrates or represents Wayzata. The black bar represents the average, and then you can see the other school districts of a comparison there. So we're in the lower third, if you will, in regard to comparisons with our many of our neighboring districts, and under the state average as well. So that'll be a fact and a point of conversation that you'll want to keep in mind as we move forward and give consideration to how we want to move forward with renewal of our operating levy. And just to give a little bit more about what these funds are used for, it's a general, it goes to the general fund, and the general fund provides most of what we do in a school district. It pays for our teachers and counselors and staff throughout, many of our staff members throughout the district. We've used it to maintain class sizes a bit under where we had been many years ago, and this levy has helped us to keep those at a lower level than we would be able to without these funds. So it's helped us to keep up with our growing enrollment, and it's helped to provide students with support services as well. And then you're aware also that we have a Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. They meet monthly, and we receive in that group presentations typically from our Executive Director of Finance and Business, Jim Westrom, along with his team members about different aspects of the funding and the financial status of the school district. And the one of the things that we've had conversations about is that it's been a number of years since we've taken action to go to the maximum cap with this operating levy. And in the coming weeks or months, we'll be having some conversation about is the time right for us to do that. And as you saw over the last several years, we've been reducing budgets. We're anticipating that the state formula funding model is likely to follow recent patterns of not equaling anticipated inflationary increases. So conversations that you'll want to be having, I think, in the coming weeks is to talk about the current levy amount that we bring forward to the community and what you may want to do with that total amount, and possibly consider bringing that forward in the fall for consideration by the community based on what your decision is to present to them. We have a second levy, so I've spoken thus far, gave you a little bit of an enrollment and facilities update. And then we've spoken about this operating levy, which is one of several levies actually that are in place, but that one primarily funds the general operating fund. We also have two technology levies, one of which the community approved in 2015 or 14, 2014, I believe, when we did the high school renovation in Meadow Ridge. We also had a technology question that was renewed in 2014. This one was renewed in 2009, just as our operating levy was. The maximum number of years that you can bring forth for a community to approve a levy, whether operating or technology, is a 10-year duration. So that 2009 levy for technology that we approved, much as with our operating levy, is nearing that expiration date. So that'll be another conversation that you'll want to have. These are funds that we use to replenish computers, iPads, and other technology systems that we use for instruction, and also to fund some of the support staff and the professional development staff for implementation of the technology systems. So this brings us about $3.5 million per year, and helps us to extend and expand our interest in personalized learning, and giving students the tools to explore areas of interest and to extend and enhance their classroom experience. And funding considerations is, as I'd indicated before, the legislature is currently in place. I think they're scheduled to wrap up around May 22nd, I think, if I have the date correct, somewhere in that vicinity. Sometimes they will, as you're aware, go into an extended or special session if they don't have their work done by that time. Having heard recent reports, it sounds like they're making good progress towards their goal, and many that I'm hearing from are feeling as though they'll be able to meet that timeline, but until we get to that point, it's just hard to know. But they're working on it, and we'll remain in that unknown area until we know what they approve for the coming year. We've been working with CFAC, our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, to prepare scenarios and to address our growth and our funding needs. And we'll continue to use all of the financial tools that are available to us, and as always, seeking to minimize the tax impact to our residents and to our community, and always being prudent as well. So those are some of the things, again, that additional conversations and outcomes of the legislative session will be in the mix for the discussions that we have in the coming weeks. So a timeline, and again, this is speculative, if you will, and nothing is chiseled in granite with this, but I've mentioned the legislative session deadline coming up. Once we know what the legislature approves for the biennium, it'll give us an opportunity then to begin reviewing our 17-18 budget. We've been moving that forward and working to develop that over the last several months, and we'll review how that matches up with the legislative action, and then we'll move forward and present you with a budget for your authorization on June 12th to approve the budget. As you're aware, we need to have an approved budget taken care of prior to the new fiscal year, which begins July 1. And we'll also, at that meeting, look toward authorizing leadership to prepare referendum, myself and Jim Weston, referendum funding requests, and also a review and comment in order to be responsive to that enrollment growth, in addition to the operating levy and the technology levy. It's possible, well, if you were to move forward with the recommendation of the facilities committee, As you'll recall, their recommendation was the addition of another elementary school to accommodate the growth. We would go to work on preparing more of the details with that and through a process called a review and comment, which is a document or a series of documents presented to Minnesota Department of Education. And at the work session, we would take a look at, in the June 26th work session, review referendum funding requests. And depending on how you direct us at that meeting or what additional information that you would like for us to move forward, we'd establish this target date. If this evolves this way, and if you would be inclined to recommend approving referendum funding requests as outlined, we would project that July 10th school board meeting as possibly being a date when you could do that if that's the direction that the discussions lead you to. But again, these are kind of flexible to achieve those objectives if they're the ones chosen. You know, we do have critical timelines for submission of proposals and information to a variety of entities, so we'd have to be mindful of that. But again, these are all things that we'll be talking about in the coming weeks, and wanted you tonight to just have an overview and an understanding about some of the things that we've been working on and that we'll be bringing to you for your consideration and further guidance and direction. So with that, I'll offer an opportunity, Mr. Chair and members, for you to ask me any questions, some of which I may defer to my able team sitting over to your right. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to respond to those.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Anderson. I will defer to my board colleagues for any questions or comments. It was a lot of information, still in the process of digesting, but I'll turn it over to any of my board colleagues for any questions. No questions.
I have
A comment? Yes, please.
I thought it was an extremely clear presentation of sort of precisely where we are right now and what we need to think about, so thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Well, you know where to find me if you have follow-up questions. So,
Well, thank you, Dr. Anderson. I jotted a few comments down having to do with, you know, getting updates to data along the way and possible role of the growth task force as we continue on, given our growth and whether we're continuing on an upward trajectory. I think that's information that we can ask the district to provide updates on at a later date. So thank you very much for the report. Appreciate it.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Excellent.